Welcome to our first video about speeches. In this video, we'll take an overview of broad things to bear in mind before and when writing and delivering speeches. In the other tailored video I've prepared for you, we'll look at extracts from a number of speeches given by notable people, many of them famed for their speech making, and we'll explore the precise patterns and strategies they use. As with many of the genres we explore in this module, with speech writing it is really useful to come back to some of the key questions we asked in the More Than Words video. Why? Why might you need to write a speech? There are all sorts of reasons related to both work and personal contexts where a speech might be required. I've pinpointed a few that I think are most relevant to the careers you're all likely to enter, and the most likely reasons for speech writing in the context of small businesses and organisations such as those you're writing for and about on this module. First, if you find yourself working for a politician in a communications role in your future career, you may well be asked to write a speech. While some politicians do write their own speeches, and that often comes across in the passion and personal commitment with which they deliver them, many employ speechwriters to do it for them. Your job, if you're ever tasked with writing a speech for a politician, is to make it so that the audience really wouldn't be able to tell there was another writer involved and would presume the politician had written it themselves. In other words, the most talented speechwriters can make themselves invisible and write with the voice and passions of the person delivering the speech. Secondly, if you end up working for a business that creates new things, whether those be products or services, the launch of a new product or service is a key time for a speech. In public relations terms, the more of an event you can build up around the launch, the more impact it will potentially have. Someone delivering a speech at a launch event is a perfect way to communicate the brand personality to the audience. Thirdly, if you work for a charity, community organisation or campaigning organisation, a speech at an event again can be the perfect way to build the profile of the charity or organisation, or to encourage people to donate to the cause. These third sector organisations are very dependent on support, both financial and volunteering, from the general public, so it's crucial to make them feel it, both in terms of having an emotional reaction or connection to the cause, and in terms of feeling part of team whatever it is. What? What is the purpose of your speech? What approach should it take? What type of material should be in it? There are three key approaches to speech writing and related impacts you want a speech to have. Firstly, putting information across clearly. A speech is not the time for major detail or nuance. Your audience need to be able to understand what you're saying in a short time and retain some of that information, so it needs to be clear and it needs to be digestible. This is all the more important if the spoken speech is the only channel through which the information will be communicated. That is, if there's no presentation or other visual aids presented along with it. Secondly, persuading your audience to believe something or do something. This is particularly relevant in a political context, where the speech will almost always be seeking to persuade people to either vote for a party, or believe in their broad ideological stance, or support their latest policy. Thirdly, entertaining your audience. If you make your audience laugh, you're halfway to winning them over. Finding something amusing can make it more memorable. And basically, if people are having a good time, they're more likely to believe or do what you'd like them to believe or do. You're probably thinking, wait a minute there, Anthea, I can think of contexts where entertaining an audience with a speech would be completely inappropriate. And you'd be right. Say the CEO of a business had to give a speech to her workers to let them know that the business was going to make cutbacks, and some of them might be made redundant. That would be no laughing matter at all. Or if a politician had to respond to the economic downturn that had led to the CEO having to make that speech, If the economic downturn had happened on the politician's watch and was due to some decisions she had made, she would be hugely criticised for giving a speech that contained any humour at all. Potential inappropriateness in a speech is perhaps most obvious when thinking about entertainment. But actually, the overall balance between all three elements should be different for different contexts. This is something you'll get to know and feel with practice. When writing a speech for some contexts, you can and should think beyond your initial audience. The audience for a speech, or at least the audience for particular elements of it, can go much wider than those it's initially delivered to. Remember in the genre video we considered the ways in which some elements of content from one genre are picked up in another? Remember, this usually happens because something strategic has been done in the initial genre in order to try to get it picked up by the second genre. With speech writing, what you want to focus on in this regard is sound bites. If you work in a short, striking, tightly structured key phrase or sentence, it might well get picked up by the press, the broadcast news, or social media. To understand what a soundbite is, think about famous lines from speeches that you remember. If a line has been used and reused and is recognised and remembered by lots and lots of people, it has often been a successful soundbite. And you don't need to have been around at the time the soundbite was delivered for it to resonate with you. Perhaps the most famous of all is Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream." Remember though, just how many memes there are circulating about Boris Johnson, about Arlene Foster, or about Michelle O'Neill. To create a successful soundbite, you need to choose your words wisely and ensure that they fit with your actions. If you don't, or if they don't, it might backfire on you to hilarious and potentially devastating effect. In other words, don't be all form and no substance. And that piece of advice goes for the full speech, not just the sound bites. No matter how well written your speech is, other conditions must be met for it to be fit for purpose. Aristotle summed these up in his rhetorical triangle, consisting of logos, ethos, and pathos. Did you watch the initial prep video about this? If by any chance you didn't, make sure you go back and do so when this video ends. It's a brilliant illustration of how the rhetorical triangle works, so I always use it rather than reinventing the wheel with my own description of it. Just a quick reminder though. Logos is your information, how clear and easily understood it is. Ethos is the credibility of the speaker. Will the audience find them trustworthy as a source to deliver this information? Does their expertise or experience need to be flagged up a bit if they are not very well known in the context? Pathos is all about the feeling, the emotion, whether the audience can be made to support the cause and feel part of the team. If you're really switched on, you might be thinking that the rhetorical triangle reminds you of something else we've explored in this video. Remember the pie chart illustration of the fact that you need to carefully balance your information, persuasion, and entertainment? You could map these three elements onto the rhetorical triangle. Why not have a bit of a doodle after you've finished watching this video and try working out what maps onto what? One will not fit exactly over the other. For example, entertainment could work to create some level of pathos, but there will be other contexts where entertainment should be the last way to try to achieve pathos. For example, in that CEO and redundancy scenario we thought about earlier. And entertainment could also be one way of making your information clear and memorable, so it can fit with logos too. You might also ponder that there's an interesting relationship between ethos and persuasion. Having someone who is credible and trustworthy deliver a speech might go quite a way to making it persuasive, even before you start thinking about the language used. On the other hand, if someone is not perceived as credible or trustworthy, no amount of persuasive speech writing strategies and patterns will completely fix that. And using too many might even make the ethos situation worse and might make the audience trust the speaker even less. So what should you take away from this broad overview of speech writing? I guess one key thing is that there's a very interesting interplay between simplicity and complexity with speech writing. It can be made to look extremely simple, but there can be a myriad of complexity behind it. It is based on very simple and straightforward principles, but there is complexity in how these can best be applied in different contexts. You want to deliver a simple message, but you have some complex linguistic work to do to make sure the audience will find it simple and will remember it. That final point provides us with a nice springboard into the next key content video, where we will explore in detail how to use patterns of language to write a good speech using Atkinson's strategies from the key reading. And if you're really switched on, you'll have noticed that I just used 3 linguistic patterns to get us there. See you in the next video.